Hello and welcome to this video on Macbeth. In this particular video, I'm going to look specifically at how to answer an exam question for the AQA GCSE in English literature based on Macbeth. So if you're doing a different exam board or a different text, look away because this video is not for you. Right, so in terms of the actual exam question, this is how it will be presented when you go into your assessment. You'll have an explanation of where the extract comes from the play at the top of the page. You'll have the extract itself, then you have the exam question underneath. The exam question reminds you to explore both the extract and the rest of the play, and it reminds you how many marks are available for this question. So we have 30 marks available for what you write, so that's your knowledge of the text, your analysis, your references to context, and there's 4 marks available for your spelling, punctuation and grammar. So make sure that you've got those capital letters and those apostrophes and that really good vocabulary where you can. So let's break the question down a little bit. It says to read the following extract from Act 1, Scene 3, then answer the question that follows. At this point in the play, Macbeth has just been told that he is to be the new Thane of Cawdor. The second of the witch's prophecies has come true. Okay, so we need to think about what comes before this extract in the play, what comes after the extract, and why is the extract important in relation to the overall narrative. And these are 3 questions that you should ask yourself with any extract that you get in the exam. Now, I know because I've studied the play in lots of depth, and you should know because you'll have done lots of revision, that before this extract in the play, Macbeth is described as being a great leader in battle. He and Banquo have defeated the invading forces that are threatening Scotland's sovereignty, and they've secured the safety of their nation. And we know that after this, Malcolm is announced to be Duncan's heir, the Prince of Cumberland, and Macbeth then goes on to murder King Duncan. Why is this extract important? Well, here we see Macbeth making this decision about whether he's going to progress with this idea of murdering Duncan or not. Then we can look at the extract itself. So let's just read. 2 truths are told as happy prologues to the swelling act of the imperial theme. I thank you, gentlemen. This supernatural soliciting cannot be ill, cannot be good. If ill, why has it given me earnest of success commencing in a truth? I am the Thane of Cawdor. If good, why do I yield to that suggestion whose horrid image doth unfix my hair and make my seated heart knock at my ribs against the use of nature? Present fears are less than horrible imaginings. My thought, whose murder yet is but fantastical, shakes so my single state of man that function is smothered in surmise, and nothing is but what is not. Okay, so when you're in the exam, the thing that's really easy to focus on is how much you don't understand in the text and getting lost with the difficult vocabulary. But what you need to look at is what you do understand. And we're going to do that by using the 5 W's. The first one is who is in the extract. So we know Macbeth is the main character here. Where are they, or where is that character? Well, because I know the play really well, I know that he's outside, he's on the return from the battle back to his castle. And where does this happen in the play? So that little bit of contextual information you get at the top of the question is really important here, but also your knowledge of the whole text is really important too. So you need to know the narrative of this play inside out. So when does this particular scene happen? Well, Macbeth has met the witches, he's heard the prophecies, he's also been told that one prophecy is fulfilled. He has become the Thane of Cawdor. And because he knows that that prophecy has been fulfilled, he's starting to think in his mind, well, what if the other prophecy is true as well? What if the prophecy that I'm going to be King of Scotland is also true? How can I make that prophecy come true? Well, I could kill Duncan. So that's what's going on in his head in this scene. Here we go. What are they doing or talking about? So Macbeth is considering why the witches have told him the truth about becoming the Thane of Cawdor, and the thought of murdering Duncan enters his mind, but it causes him a lot of fear. And why is this happening? Well, Shakespeare is showing how Macbeth's mind is conflicted and that he's already considering what violent actions he would take to fulfill his ambitions. So we've read our extract, we've understood what we can from it, and then let's look at the question itself. So it says, starting with this speech, explain how you think Shakespeare presents Macbeth's conflicted state of mind. Write about how Shakespeare presents Macbeth in this extract, how Shakespeare presents Macbeth in the play as a whole. So the word how is the first one I've highlighted there, and that tells you that you need to analyse. Whenever you see how in an English question, it's looking for analysis. Then we know that we're focusing on the character of Macbeth, we're focusing on the fact that his mind is conflicted, and that means kind of broken into different sections. Part of his mind wants to do one thing, part of it wants to do something else. Then the question reminds you to write about both the extract and the whole play, and it's really important that you do both of those things in order to get those marks. Okay, so I'm going to start making my plan. In the exam, I'd have only about 5 minutes, probably less than 5 minutes to do this. So it's important to practice this process so it gets really slick and really fast and almost automatic. In terms of the plan, I'm going to jot down a point and a quotation for each paragraph. And I've divided my paragraphs into 5. So I'm going to look at the beginning of the extract, the middle of the extract, the end of the extract, and then 2 ideas from the rest of the play. What I'm not going to do is worry about ideas in the extract if I don't understand them. I'm going to focus in on what I remember and what I do understand. So the first thing I'm going to write down is that Shakespeare presents Macbeth as conflicted because he doesn't know whether to trust the witches. Okay, and my quotation for that comes from the extract, and he says this: supernatural, soliciting, cannot be ill, cannot be good. In my plan, I'm not going to write down the whole quotation because I'm going to try and save that time for writing my essay, but I'm just going to jot down the start of that quotation so that I remember which one I'm working on. Then I'm going to move down to the middle of the extract, and I'm going to look at this rhetorical question that he asks, as he says, why hath it given me earnest of success commencing in a truth? So what I'm going to put in here is that Shakespeare focuses on Macbeth's confusion regarding being awarded the title of Thane of Cawdor. Okay, and then when I'm analysing that, I can talk about that rhetorical question that he uses. Zooming a little bit further down, not quite towards the end of the extract, but almost there, there's another rhetorical question here where he says, why do I yield to that suggestion, etc., against the use of nature? And this is Macbeth starting to think about the fact that he might murder Duncan. So Shakespeare introduces the idea of Macbeth murdering Duncan and his equivocation about whether or not this is a good idea. Macbeth suggests it is unnatural to commit regicide. Okay, and then that opens you up to a discussion about the divine right of kings and bringing in all that lovely context that you know. Right, then we need to think about 2 ideas from the rest of the play. The world is your oyster here. There are so many different things that you could write about. What I'm going to focus on is a couple of sections that I know really well and that I know I can write fabulous paragraphs about. So I'm going to start with Act 1, Scene 7, which is after Macbeth has told Lady Macbeth what's going to happen, or sorry, what's been predicted to happen, and then they plan the murder, and then in Act 1, Scene 7, Macbeth starts to say, well, actually, I'm not sure about this, I don't want to do this, and we see that conflict within his mind. What's going to happen if I go ahead and kill King Duncan? And then Macbeth has this really strong statement, and he says, we will proceed no further in this business. So he looks at all of the pros and cons of murdering Duncan, and he says, right, we're not going to do it. So this is almost a resolution to conflict, and what is so interesting about this moment is that Lady Macbeth immediately undercuts this and says, of course we're going to go and do this. If you don't do this, you're not a real man. So I'm going to say in Act 1, Scene 7, Shakespeare shows a moment of conviction in Macbeth, which is quickly undermined by his wife. Okay, and then my last idea about the rest of the play, I'm going to look later on when we see the guilt taking over Macbeth's mind, and a lovely quotation that's really good to analyse is when he says, full of scorpions is my mind, dear wife. There is so much going on in this quotation, I don't have time to talk about it here. But my point sentence, I'm going to say, as the play progresses, Shakespeare emphasises Macbeth's increasing psychological disintegration and his feelings of guilt. Okay, so that is all we need to do for our plan, and then we would go on to writing the actual essay. Now that I've made my plan, I'm going to move on to writing my introduction. And in my introduction, I'm going to aim to do three things. Firstly, I'm going to contextualise the extract, so explain where it comes into play and why that's important. I'm going to address the question. Obviously, we need to answer the question in our essays. And I'm going to conceptualise, which means looking at the key concepts or the big ideas in the text. So starting off with contextualising the extract then. And these are sentence starters that you can learn so you're ready to go into the exam with them prepared. So in this extract from the Rising Action, I'm putting Rising Action because it is Act 1, Scene 3 of the play. If it was Act 3, Scene 4, I might put the climax or the falling action. If it was Act 5, Scene 8, I would put the denouement of the play. So in this extract from the Rising Action, Shakespeare explores Macbeth's conflicted state of mind. What you notice here is I'm using the wording of the question, so making it really clear to the examiner that I know what I've been asked to focus on. So in this extract from the Rising Action, Shakespeare explores Macbeth's conflicted state of mind as he turns to that idea of regicide. Okay, so I have contextualised the extract, so I'm just going to delete that. Next thing I'm going to do is move on to address the question. So whilst Macbeth has been presented as a single-minded and courageous warrior in Act 1, Scene 2, here Shakespeare emphasises his equivocation and uncertainty. So what I've done here is I've indicated a wider knowledge of the play. It's quite helpful to drop in little references to the whole text early on in your essay, just in case you run out of time in the exam. So I've demonstrated that knowledge of the whole play. I've demonstrated an understanding that Macbeth's character is going to change from being single-minded to being conflicted to equivocating to being uncertain. So I've addressed the question, and now I'm going to conceptualise, so look at a big idea. And one of the most important big ideas in the text is of ambition and the consequences of ambition. So I'm going to say, through focusing on this aspect of Macbeth's character, Shakespeare raises the issue of the detrimental consequences of overwhelming ambition on the mind of the individual. Okay, so that is our introduction. 3 sentences doing 3 things. Firstly, we're starting from within this extract from, and then you put your section of the play. So that is a sentence starter that you could learn. And then we say Shakespeare explores, and then whatever the question asks you to look at. Then we're addressing the question here. And then finally, we are conceptualizing, so looking at those big ideas. So these bits I've highlighted in yellow, you could learn off by heart so that you have them ready for your exam. Now we need to write our paragraphs in our essay. As you saw in my plan, I've planned out 5 paragraphs, and I'm just going to model how I would write one of those paragraphs, because obviously if I did all 5 it would take forever. So in our paragraphs, what we're looking to do is build up a bank of evidence and analysis which is going to support the key idea in the essay. And that key idea is around Macbeth's increasingly conflicted mind. So the paragraph I'm going to look at is the one about the scorpions. Full of scorpions is my mind, dear wife. And the first thing I'm going to do in my paragraph is give a little bit of context as to where this quotation is coming from. Because you want to be kind to your examiner, you want to guide them through your essay rather than kind of dropping quotations in here and there without any kind of signposting. So I'm going to say, towards the end of the play, Shakespeare increasingly focuses on Macbeth's psychological disintegration. I'm not using the phrase conflicted mind from the question, but I'm using similar wording just to show the examiner that I'm still focused on the topic. So then I'm going to say, whilst the tragic hero refuses to tell Lady Macbeth his plans, he does confide in her that full of scorpions is my mind, dear wife. Now, what I've done there is embedded my quotation fluently in my sentence. So instead of saying a quotation to show this is, or we can see this in the line, I've told a little snippet of the story and then used the quotation to finish that story off. After this, I'm going to start to analyse the quotation, and that means that I'm going to unpick the words, the phrases, the images that Shakespeare has chosen to use to communicate his ideas. And a really nice way of structuring your analysis is to start with ostensibly, so the surface meaning of the quotation that we're looking at, and then to move on to the phrase on closer inspection, so to peel back the layers of that quotation. And that's going to give you a real sense of depth to your analysis. So I'm going to say, ostensibly, this image conveys the intense pain that Macbeth is undergoing, and which has resulted from actions driven by all-consuming ambition. And here comes my on closer inspection. So, however, on closer inspection, the image of the deadly scorpion also conjures up the idea of poison, reminding us that Macbeth's mind has been tarnished by the witch's prophecies and Lady Macbeth's Machiavellian scheming. Now, there's lots of things going on in that sentence. I've got my on closer inspection to prompt me to dig deeper into the quotation. I've got the word image, which is subject terminology. You don't need to use subject terminology all the time or to overdo it, but just using it occasionally makes your answer really precise. I'm referencing the scorpion, so taking that idea out of the quotation to look at it in more depth. And then here, I'm looking at the connotations and the meanings of that word. And of course, we know that scorpions have poison in their tails, and we can imagine this as a really physical image of the scorpion with its poison tail inside Macbeth's mind. Then I'm explaining why Macbeth's mind is in this state. Well, it's been tarnished, hasn't it, by the scheming of other characters and also by himself. There's a whole debate there that we could go into if we had time. So I'm going to then move on to the big idea, the key concepts, and I'm going to say that Shakespeare is exploring how evil spreads and infects those that it comes into contact with, and how this can destabilise the leadership of a nation. In your essays, you should be continually moving between the real close analysis of the text and then the deeper meanings and the key concepts that the author is communicating. And that's the same for all of your literature texts. Now, lots of you will say, well, that's probably a paragraph finished. And of course it is not. If you're in any of my lessons, you'll know that there's always more to write. So I'm going to use the connector furthermore just to prompt a little bit more writing on this. So I'm going to say here, furthermore, Macbeth's scorpion-infected mind prompts him to plan the murder of Banquo and Fleance in this scene. And this decision represents a structural shift in the play. Don't forget that analysis doesn't just mean analysis of language and of imagery, but also of the structure of the text. And if you can show a good understanding of how the different aspects of the text fit together and why they fit together in that particular sequence, in that particular order, then that's going to be a really good thing to do in your essays. So, whereas Macbeth's previous victim was an aging king, he is now ordering others to kill his friends and a child. There's so much we could say about this, but I'm going to try and stay focused on the question. And this child symbolises innocence and purity. By emphasising how Macbeth makes this plan without the prompting of the witches or Lady Macbeth, Shakespeare reveals the tragic hero's depths of depravity. And I'm just going to return us to the question again, which is about the conflicted mind. So I'm going to say perhaps now Macbeth's mind is less conflicted and more set on total chaos and destruction. So I'm kind of disagreeing with the question a little bit there, and that is absolutely fine. So in terms of sentence starters that you could use in your other essays, this idea of signposting where we are in the text is really quite important. So towards the end of the play, Make sure that you're constantly or frequently using the author's surname. So don't call him William, make sure you call him Shakespeare, but use the author's surname to show that you're focusing on the choices that the writer is making. Another sentence starter that we looked at was ostensibly and however on closer inspection. Shakespeare is exploring is a useful one. That furthermore might come in useful. And by emphasising how Shakespeare reveals might come in useful as well. The final thing I'm going to show you is writing your conclusion. Now, like our introduction, our conclusion can be quite concise, quite brief, and we really only need to do a couple of things in it. And that is respond to the question, so we need to give our definite answer to that question, and we need to conceptualise as well. Now, I really like starting my conclusions in an exam context with the word ultimately, because that signals to the examiner that I've reached my final comments. I also like to try and give a little bit of depth to that conclusion, so to try and show maybe different sides to a character or different ways of interpreting the question. So here I'm going to do ultimately, although Shakespeare presents Macbeth's mind as conflicted in the opening acts of the play, he becomes increasingly single-minded as we move towards the final act. Macbeth focuses on maintaining power at any cost, and his remorse for his actions somewhat disappears. So what I'm saying here is that yes, his mind is conflicted. That's what the question's asking us to look at. But that level of conflict changes and transforms as we get towards the end of the play, when he just wants to maintain his kingship. And then I'm going to conceptualise, so again looking at those key concepts, those big ideas that Shakespeare is exploring. So I'm going to say, in presenting the tragic hero's evolution in this way, Shakespeare reveals the impact of overwhelming ambition and the danger that leaders may become corrupted by their lust for power. So that idea of ambition and that corruption are key concepts in the play. So that is all I need to do for my conclusion, and my essay is done. So thank you very much for watching this video. If you're watching this on YouTube, make sure you check out my website, amysmithliterature.wordpress.com, as there's lots of resources there that you can download that will accompany your revision for Shakespeare, for Macbeth. And if you're looking at this on my website, then thank you very much for visiting that as well. Okay, goodbye.